All right, everybody, you have just tuned into the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And I have an idea things are going to be very interesting on this show because despite the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are 6-0 and are the only unbeaten team left in the NFL, I think there are a lot of things to discuss. And certainly we will get to those. Ben is with me right now, and Ian will be joining very shortly. But the Steelers defeat the Titans 27-24 after having a 27-7 lead, and that slowly evaporated over the course of the second half. And I guess, Ben, that's probably the best place to start. Even though I don't want to take away from the fact that the first half was really a beautiful thing to watch, quite frankly, offensively. But go ahead, give me your sentiments on the game Sunday in Nashville.
Offensively, defensively, every way, the first half was pretty nice. It really was. Yeah. And, the Titans couldn't convert a third down to save their lives. Everything was fantastic till that last play where Ben threw a pick. And that happened. That quite literally was a Hail Mary play. I didn't like the decision there either, to be perfectly honest. I wish he would have taken a short pass, counted on somebody getting out of bounds, or running up and spiking the ball and then kicking the field goal. Okay, because he didn't have the shot at the end zone that he wanted. Right. He took a chance because he had a lead. With a team that good, I'd rather he didn't take those kinds of chances. You put your foot in their throat and you hold them down and you move forward. Now, the second half wasn't quite as pretty, but and I do want to point this out before we start talking about this. I'm going to open something, though.
Ah, yes.
The Titans really got a lot of lucky bounces, a lot of tipped balls. Yeah. I'm serious. A lot of tipped balls.
I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Yeah. A lot of things could have gone really badly, and the Titans still could not manage to come back.
Right.
And they kept getting break after break after break after break. And some of that was on the Steelers, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And some of that was the Titans making plays, and a lot of it was just luck. Ugh. And they still could not come back. Couldn't do it. The kicker choking at the end, that was beautiful. And we would have gone to overtime and they would have had some momentum. But
oh, yes.
I don't buy necessarily that the Steelers would have lost. I'm sorry.
No, I think it was.
It's starting to, and again, it's being positive. Mm-hmm. It's starting to feel like this could be a very special season, being completely serious. And I'm probably the most skeptical person on this podcast. And I will just tell you guys that this is really starting to feel like there's something here, like something's faded. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens. I still don't think they're going to go undefeated. I've said that all along. I still do not believe that. At some point they will lose. Hopefully not this week because I hate the fucking Ravens. But, they're going to lose at some point. And, you're trying to make a point here. So go ahead. What's up?
Well, it's not even – I think what it is I'm trying to keep myself from ranting because it's a really minor thing, but I keep going back to the end of the first half, and you elaborated on this already. You're at the 32-yard line. You got 14 seconds left. You're up 27-7, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, go ahead, drop back. If you've got, let's say, Chase Claypool one-on-one with a DB, throw it up into the end zone where either he's going to get it or nobody's going to get it, okay?
Yep.
And then just kick the damn field goal.
Or Eric Ebron. Well, from that point, Mark, it was a 54-yarder.
Yes. And what I'm getting at is either do that or, as you said, take the out route. Just take the long field goal opportunity because now if you make that, you're up 23 points.
Exactly.
Now you really put pressure on Tennessee.
You would have been up 20 points at that point.
Well, it wasn't at 27-7 at that time.
No, it was 24-7. They got another field goal in the third quarter.
That's right. Okay. So it would have put it shit. That destroyed my argument.
But still, I mean, you're up 20 points if you kick that field goal there. Right. I agree with you. Rather than going for 6, he should have just said, okay, if it's not there, I'm going to take a 10-yard gain and we'll kick a 40-some-odd yard field goal rather than, and get some points here, which we shouldn't really have even gotten. But our defense.
No, it was a gift.
Yeah, our defense had a stand, and now we've got the ball back. So let's get some points. And, he didn't. And sometimes Ben is greedy, and he's only human, and it's okay to acknowledge that, in my opinion.
It is, and we're going to acknowledge that a little bit more and when we talk about the fourth quarter interception here in a minute. But let me welcome Ian in. Ian, we've gotten basically as far as talking about the lucky bounces the Titans had, and we were just kind of breaking down, the end of the first half there.
Yes.
So welcome in. But your general thoughts on the game in Nashville on Sunday?
Well, I'm thrilled that we won. I expected it to be a close game, and the final score was close, but that wasn't really indicative of how the game went. It was really a tale of two halves, that we dominated the first half and they dominated the second half, and we more or less held on for victory. But we got a win, and we're the only unbeaten team, so I can't complain too much about it. As Mike Tomlin said, it's better to learn lessons when you're winning than when you're losing, because as we know full well, the margin of victory in the NFL, the difference between 10-6 and 6-10 is actually not that much. It's like a couple bounces here and there. And I'm not saying we'd be as bad as the Jets, but like if you think about it, like, okay, look at Minnesota. Minnesota was hailed as like one of the, they were a playoff team last year.
Yep.
A lot of us predicted that they would make the playoffs again this year.
I did.
They're 1-5. Like, so it's
and having a fire sale.
And having a fire sale. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice Arrested Development reference too. I applaud that. Coming in strong here. But that being said, you're right. Tennessee got a lot of lucky bounces, including there were a couple turnovers our defense could have had, that balls hitting cornerbacks in the hands, and a couple fumbles that Tennessee was able to fall on. That being said, we got a little lucky too. James Conner fumbled. He was able to recover. Chase Claypool had a really bad fumble that was easily a returnable for a touchdown kind of fumble.
Yeah, that's right.
Laying out there, that he was able to get back and get on as well. So we did get a couple bounces. It wasn't like we got none, but we also got
that bounce at the end of the game where they missed the kick. I was going to say, come on,
Ben, you're stealing my thunder here. I was going to say we got the most important one, which was revenge for Joe Nedney. Fuck that guy. Ian
said fuck again.
Yeah, that's right.
Ding, 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 ding.
Our fans on Twitter love it. So it's we got the biggest one that mattered, which was them missing the field goal at the end.
Yeah. And hey, you know what? I hate that I felt deflated at the end of the game, because I did. It was such a good first half. And in the second half, I mean, we were so close to blowing that. And I know we didn't. I know we won. And that's the important thing. But man, that felt like one of those games that just it's like, typical Steelers. We just can't have nice things. Just beat a team senseless, which we had done the week before.
Yeah. Again, I made this point before Ian came on, and I stand by it. It just starting to feel like there's something faded here. Like they're the dumb little things that have happened in seasons past where they had character issues in the team, frankly.
Right.
And, they would blow these games out of nowhere, and just one lucky thing here or there would not go their way, and they'd end up losing games. And this year, maybe it's the opposite. They had some things week 2 versus Denver where it could have gone the wrong way, and it didn't. And they had some things this week that could have gone the wrong way, and they didn't. And I'm just starting to feel like this might be a special season, honestly, because of the way it's coming together already. And it's early. It is. I don't want people to get too far ahead of themselves, but it's starting to feel that way. It's weird. And I'm pretty enthusiastic right now. Now, like I said, I still don't think they're going to go undefeated, but We'll see.
No, I don't either. But I do, before we move on and talk.
The other thing I'll add is
go ahead.
that, you said you felt deflated. I'll say I felt emotionally drained.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I think part of it was, we felt so good. We were on such a high at halftime.
Ugh.
And then A.J. Brown had that big touchdown. And all of a sudden, you start to get flashbacks of Super Bowl 43 with, Larry Fitzgerald running through the secondary.
Yeah. Yep.
And we talked about it all week about how Derrick Henry's capable of breaking a big one at any time. He's especially as the game wears on and the defense wears down and starts to get a little sloppy on their angles, he has that breakaway speed. And it really felt like we were hanging on in desperation. And to come out with a victory is tremendous. And I do agree with Ben that this team has that intestinal fortitude that some of the teams in the past didn't have. Those other teams would have just folded emotionally,
right?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. They would have folded. And it really feels like,
it really feels like this team has more mental strength.
Yes.
They're stronger mentally. Their character's better. They're just a better group of guys. It's a tighter team. And I think that's might be why, Lombardi always said, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, but he always said that luck was the residue of thorough preparation. And this seems to be a well-prepared team. Don't get me wrong. They don't play perfectly, but they acknowledge it when they fuck up. And they continue to work at honing their game and refining their craft. And that's the difference this year. We don't have any individuals in this team. All these guys are adders or multipliers, as Craig Wolfley describes them.
He does.
Yes.
I'm going to be Debbie Downer then, because I want to talk about the interception in the fourth quarter.
Well, that's fine.
Well, look.
He threw it. He acknowed that it was a bad throw, so let's move on.
Ben totally acknowledged it. He owned up to it. I mean, he didn't place blame on anybody else. He took it, okay? Yep. But you're up 3. What was it, 3rd and 7?
No, it was longer than that. It was like 3rd and 13.
Okay, but what somebody was open about 7 yards is what I was thinking. Get you closer to the field goal.
No, you had to get to the 7 to get the
first down.
Yeah. And I mean, he could have thrown to either Claypool on the out to his left, or he could have dumped it off in the middle to Johnson, and Johnson might have gotten the first down. Might not have.
Right.
It would have put you in a position where you could have kicked a field goal at least.
Yeah, at least you're up 6. But look, I understand in technical terms that was not what we would call triple coverage. There's not too many teams that actually triple cover one guy. But that said, I think he was just trusting Juju to make a play, and Juju had his hands on the ball. I mean, you can't.
He did, really, but Ben threw it inside, and Ben threw it a little bit short, and. Yep. Yeah, he could have. It was not a great decision. I think all 3 of us agree on that. We talked about it earlier today.
Yep.
Bad decision on Ben's part, and Ben acknowledged as much. And he also said he threw the ball late. But he could have made that catch had Ben placed it over his right shoulder and a little bit long.
Yes.
Juju would have been in a position to make that catch, and then we all would have gone, oh, my God, I can't believe he made that throw.
Yep, higher and longer. Yeah. But again, and I not to belabor the point any further, but the point of the matter is we won the game, and we overcame some bounces. We got some bounces. The most important one was the one at the very end that sailed right, and here we are. We are now 6-0, and we kind of touched on this last week a little bit, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, guys. But 6-0. Ian, how good is this team? I mean, they finally beat, quote unquote, a good team based on record. That's
right, because Cleveland is trash.
Well, yeah. I mean, hey, as long as Baker Mayfield doesn't have to play the Steelers, he's all world, right? But so how good is this team, Ian?
We've seen them beat the teams they should beat, which in years past wasn't always a guarantee. That they were kind of known for losing to bad teams. Through the first few games, that we've seen, the only team that's been able to beat the Steelers has been the Steelers. I'll point this out on two out of three of Ben's interceptions. The second one was a tip pass at the line. So those things happen. I'm not terribly worried about that one. But on both of his interceptions, the play prior, the offense took a penalty. At the end of the first half, they had a penalty that set them back 5 more yards. And I don't remember if it was Ben or if it was Tomlin or if it was Fiechner, but someone said that false start penalty and Eric Ebron changed their plans for what they were going to do on the final play. So that makes me think that they had a plan other than chuck it up for the end zone and try and let your guy make a play, which at the end of the first half, you can do that. It's fine. It's not going to kill you. But that being said, if they kick that field goal and then kick the other field goal, then you're up by 9 and the whole end of the game situation is not a big deal. Right. But that 5-yard penalty made a big difference. And then at the end, let's not forget, Chase Claypool picked up the first down, but Jalen Samuels got called for offensive pass interference. Or actually Claypool, I think he got it, but he got marked short, but they probably would have gone for it on 4th and 1 at the, inside the 10-yard line.
Horrible spot, by the way.
Yeah. Nevertheless, that offensive pass interference penalty set them back 10 more yards and put them in a bad spot. And then Ben had Juju covered by a linebacker. And anytime you have Juju covered by a linebacker, that's a shot worth taking. Our Ben was absolutely right that Roethlisberger threw it inside, that if you had better ball placement and better timing, that's a touchdown. And we're talking about, how aggressive we were and how great it was. We went for the win and went for the kill shot and all that stuff. So, and the Titans were in cover 2. And, after the linebacker ripped the ball out of Juju's hands, because Ben was right that Juju had his hands on it. The linebacker made a good play to swipe it out, and then one of the two safeties came over and got it. But still, better throw that doesn't happen. But also, if we don't commit offensive pass interference, that doesn't happen. So
things change too.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw a couple other times this year we've had some fumbling issues. Ben he'd only thrown 1 interception prior to this game, and then he threw 3. They were still able to overcome those, but up to this point, it kind of looks like the only team that could beat the Steelers is the Steelers, which is the mark of a really good team, that if you don't make mistakes, you're going to be in games and competitive. Now, we're playing a Baltimore team this week that is a completely different animal, just in the way they run their offense, the way their defense is structured. They went 14-2 last year for a reason, and it wasn't all Lamar Jackson. He won the MVP. He's a great player, but their defense is really good, and they can run the ball differently than anyone else can, which makes them really hard to defend.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. Ben, go ahead.
Actually, I had a question for Ian, since he was talking about the officiating. What did you think of the officiating in general, Ian? Are you angry? Did you make notes about what a shitty crew this was? Or
we should probably preface this with the fact that Ian has more information on NFL officials than any human being. So
seems that way.
I'll just say this: that Sean Hockley, being the son of Ed Hockley, it obviously runs in his blood to throw a lot of flags, because if you'll recall, Ed Hockley's games were always flag fests.
Gotta show the guns, baby.
So I wasn't really surprised that a Sean Hockley game was also a flag fest.
Okay,
I didn't really have any problem with any of the penalties, though. There were a few things here and there they missed, and a couple things where I was like, that's a little bit ticky-tack.
There was some ticky-tacky, and that was kind of what Hockley was known for. Hockley was known for, Ed, the father, was known for throwing, I'll say, an excessive amount of flags. There were always a lot of penalties, and a lot of it was ticky-tacky stuff, and his son obviously inherited that from him.
It just seemed like the prior 2 games, the prior 2 crews we saw before this week, ignored a lot of really obvious stuff, and it got on my nerves. I'm sitting there watching the game, slightly intoxicated, yelling, "Fucking holding!" And,
it sounds to me like they must have had a conference call and somebody said, "Hey, start calling more holding," because that's the way it felt, especially in the first half. My question to you guys, and you don't have to spend a lot of time on this, But Minkah Fitzpatrick was flagged for the holding down by the goal line, and it was a legitimate call. He was holding him. He was okay. But my question is, is the NFL ever going to, and they won't because it would take points off the board more often than not, are they going to get rid of these screens and picks? Because they're really starting to drive me insane. I think it's unfair to the defender. This isn't basketball. It's football, and these guys are rubbing guys off. They're rubbing them off the umpire in the middle. I mean, it's just it irritates me. And then when I see Samuel get called for something similar at the other end, but it wasn't called on our end, that starts to irritate me. So that's my officiating piece for today. So they'll never get rid of it though, because it
make a note, Ian.
Yeah, because
all I'll say about pick plays is that Tom Brady and the Patriots won 6 Super Bowls running pick plays all the time.
Yep,
exactly.
game.
So it's not. You're right, and that's what I mean.
And that's what Belichick does. I mean, basically, he's like, this is kind of gray area. It's not really against the rules. I mean, per se, they won't enforce it. So I'm going to do this.
Yeah, it's one of those. I'm going to dare you to call it every single play, and you're not going to call it every single play, so we'll probably get away with it more often than not.
Yeah, no, and believe me, I get the strategy. It just irritates me sometimes, the lack of strategy. I like that, Bugs Bunny. I just hate the lack of consistency sometimes.
That was George W. Bush.
Well, also, yeah. Well, they're very similar. You're listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing, serving Broward and the southern Palm Beach counties. Whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos, contact Deck Roofing at deckroofingincorporated.com. Okay. Is it time to just get into the Ravens? I guess it is.
Ratbirds.
Oh, boy.
Say it right.
Ratbirds, rats. Yeah, ratty rats. Look, this is a good football team. They're good coming off a bye.
They're awesome coming off a bye.
I think Harbaugh's like 10-2 coming off the bye.
Yeah.
I guarantee, I am telling you right now, he will have something cooked up special teams wise. He almost always does for us, whether it's a fake punt, some goofy formation. I don't know. Something will happen. But all that said, Ian, how do you feel going into this one?
Extremely nervous. Baltimore is a tough place to play. This is, back-to-back road games. They're coming off a bye week, and
they will have some fans, by the way.
They will have some fans there. Yes. We just played a very physical game against Tennessee, and I think coming into this year, everyone kind of had this game chalked up as a potential loss. When no one had the Steelers going 16-0. Most of us had them somewhere in the range of 10-6, 11-5. Basically anywhere between 10 and 12 wins was where most people had them. And even at 12 wins, that means you lose 4 games. So I think most people said, okay, we'll probably split with the Ravens, lose there, win at home. And I would love to win this game. If we win this game, we're in the catbird seat, man. We're in really stinking good shape. But Baltimore is a difficult offense to defend. They haven't been quite as dynamic this year as they have been in years past, but I'm still quite nervous about this one. It's Baltimore. It's an emotional game. You want to beat the shit out of those fuckers, but they're, as much as I hate to admit it, they're well coached. They have good players that are capable of making plays, and their scheme is very good on all 3 phases. They have arguably they've had, the best special teams in the league for years. Both between kicking and punting. Justin Turner's an excellent kick, or Justin Tucker. Sorry, thinking about the guy from the Dodgers, Justin Turner, that got COVID and then went out to fucking celebrate.
Maybe Tucker will get COVID.
Yeah. But yeah, Justin Tucker's been the best kicker in the league for a while. Sam Koch's an excellent punter. They've had a series of really good punters, and even in the years where and I'm not saying we're going to get blown out by them, but it's going to be a competitive game. But I'll be pleasantly surprised. I'll be very pleasantly surprised if we win, especially with them adding Ngakoue. It's he's a really good player.
Is he able to play this week?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Ben, what's your general observation of the Rat Birds this week?
Well, they are a good team. This is going to be, as Ian pointed out, Harbaugh coming off of a bye, as insufferable an asshole as he is. His record coming off a bye is stellar. And yeah, I expect him to be a complete douchebag and take his mask off and yell at the refs and do all the Harbaugh things that Harbaugh does, and Harbaugh as hard as he can. Incessant whining. It'll just be anyway. But they're an outstanding football team, and they weren't quite ready for prime time last year. They got blown out in the first round they played. And, I think they kind of have a chip on their shoulder this year. But, looking back at their game against Kansas City, where they were solidly outplayed and defended very well by, frankly, a defense that's not as good as the Steelers, I think there is a game plan to shut down that offense. And that offense, in my opinion, is the teeth of this team. I think they are susceptible to the pass up the middle. I think they know it, and they use their safeties quite a bit to help out in pass coverage, not just as coverage guys, but as over-the-top guys. They do a weird cover 2 scheme where they leave their outside. Ian pointed this out earlier today, but it was something I noticed on film. They leave their outside guys who are very good cover guys.
Yeah, you're talking Peters and Humphrey.
Marcus Peters and Humphreys.
Yep.
And they're probably they're the best cover tandem in the league, probably. And
very good.
The passing defense on this team is not good. It ain't.
No.
And part of it is statistically they're not good because they're always playing from ahead, so the teams have to throw on them. So they're going to rack up yards because they're constantly throwing as opposed to running. And then the other part of that is they're a good run defense. So you don't try and run against them. You just throw the ball. But yeah, it's easier. It's much easier to throw in the middle of the field on these guys than it is to throw on the outside. Although I still expect Ben will try, and he'll get a shot with Chase Claypool, who's a big wide receiver, against either one of those guys, and just go, okay, yep. I see it. It's a one-on-one shot. I got to take a chance here. Throwing it high and outside. Give my guy a shot. We'll see what happens. Defensively, I don't know how they're going to work Ngakoue in, but because they run that weird 34 hybrid thing where they essentially have one pass rusher and he alternates sides. Is he going to be that guy? I don't know. But they've got good players, including Patrick McQueen's having a great year for them.
He is rookie from LSU. Yep.
Yeah. And I just, man, I'm nervous is not the word. I'm nervous and excited. I'm really excited about this week. And it's weird. I shouldn't be. I feel like I should be more anxious about it, but for whatever reason, I'm just not. And it may just have to do with the fact that I'm so sentimental about this matchup because it's the Ravens, and this really is the rivalry of rivalries for the Steelers. This is rivalry week.
Yes.
Fuck the Browns. That rivalry is manufactured in Cleveland. No one in Pittsburgh cares.
Nope.
The Bengals? Are you kidding me? That's not a rivalry. Never was. I mean, seriously, Dallas is more of a rival than Cincinnati is. I just, I am excited. I am. I can't help it.
I get it. I kind of have that same feeling. Ian, stay on the offensive side of the ball with us and against that Baltimore defense. And I know you wanted to comment on Peters and Humphrey too.
Yeah, and Ben's absolutely right. Peters and Humphrey are both really, really good cover corners, but they will take chances. We saw last year when we played them that Marlon Humphrey early in the game, tried that
yeah.
tomahawk chop swap on Juju, and he missed the ball. He hit Juju in the shoulder and also missed the tackle, and Juju took it for like a 75-yard touchdown.
Right.
In overtime, basically the same play, tried the same thing, except he hit the ball that time and caused a fumble.
Yeah.
So, they go after the ball. Peters is really known. Peters has a handful of pick sixes in his career because he will jump the underneath stuff. He's looking for those out routes that he can jump, and you can get him on double moves. He is very susceptible to being beat over the top just because he will bite on those comeback routes because he wants those interceptions. He's
a punk, so it's really cool when he loses on those kinds of matchups.
Yes. He is.
Yes. So both of those guys, while the Ravens will leave them single covered and they are both very good, they're also gamblers, and sometimes they make big plays like what happened last year in overtime, or sometimes they get burned on them. And that's a point where the offense can attack. The Ravens do a lot of, we've seen it kind of similar over the years. They do a lot of, stuffing 8 guys down in the box, 8 guys at the line of scrimmage kind of thing, 8 guys within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. And sometimes they bring them all, but more often than not, there's a couple guys dropping off into coverage. But you never really know which one it is. One thing they like to do a lot of is bringing one of their inside linebackers, whether it be LJ Fort, who we know, or Patrick Queen, lining them up in the A gap, sort of right over the center shoulder, and then dropping them into the middle of the field and essentially cutting off those shallow crossing routes and trying to get either pass deflections or interceptions. A couple of years ago when we played against them, the game when Antonio Brown had the freak out because he wasn't getting the ball enough.
Right. Despite the fact we were winning.
Yeah. They were been through a late interception and had a couple other passes that probably should have been picked basically by that guy dropping off the line of scrimmage into that sort of 7-8 yard shallow zone. And, you don't always watch the guy that's right in front of you, but then all of a sudden he's right there and you try and throw a crossing route and he's undercutting it and taking it the other way. So that's a danger to watch out for. But that said, it's not like teams that play the Tampa 2 where the inside linebacker is playing a deeper zone. So they are susceptible over the middle behind that guy.
Behind that back.
Yes, because he's playing a very shallow zone to cut off those crossers. One of the things that the Ravens do very well is because they have so many guys at the line, they can mix and match blitzes and get guys free, which means quarterbacks have to throw quick and throw hot, which is why their corners are going to play press coverage on the outside, and they're dropping guys into shallow zones, and they're either playing cover 0 or cover 1 with just one safety deep, or some kind of hybrid cover 2, like Ben mentioned. There was a couple plays against the Eagles I noticed where they essentially had the 2 slot receivers or tight end and slot receiver were double covered, and they left. There was a cover 0 because both safeties were doubling the inside guys, and they just left their outside corners on islands. But everyone else was coming hard on a blitz, and they had overloaded, and Wentz really didn't have time to throw, and the only option he had was to just chuck it up because both of his short outlets were double covered, which was a very inventive defense to run. But also, Wentz missed some throws in that game. The Eagles dropped some passes, and the Eagles nearly came back and won too.
Yeah, they could have.
So the Ravens don't necessarily have that killer instinct that they've had in years past. And looking at their defensive statistics, they've given up 7 passing touchdowns, and 4 of them have been to, I'll say, quote unquote, tight ends. One of them was to an offensive tackle against the Chiefs, but he was lined up as a tight end. So we'll call it 4 of them went to tight ends. So this is certainly a game where, Eric Ebron could find a mismatch somewhere. But the protection is going to have to be good. I expect a lot of short passes, especially early on, probably some screen passes just to try and take some teeth out of the blitz. But if Baltimore has to play from behind, they're a completely different team than they are if they're able to play ahead. Yeah,
absolutely. That's a great point. Like most teams, if they have to play from behind, their offensive scheme changes a little bit. But in fact, let's talk about that because And Ben, if you would, go ahead and comment a little bit on what you saw from Robert Spillane making his first start in place of Devin Bush. And then, how do the Steelers ultimately attack this Ravens offense?
Spillane was pretty much what we expected. He is a good run player. He's a good tackler. We knew he was fearless, relentless, would stick his head right in there and make tackles, and he did.
Oh boy.
He did. Got a stinger on Sunday, making a big tackle.
What a collision that was.
Inside the 1 yard line versus Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And, it was great that he did, because if he hadn't, he would have gone in right there.
Yeah.
He's still not a good cover linebacker. You won't convince me that he is. We're lucky in so much as Ian pointed out 2 weeks ago, the Ravens don't run a real complicated passing scheme, and it's not going to be super difficult for him to get a jump on things, diagnose plays, and get a jump on passing situations on early downs when he's in there. I don't expect him to play on passing downs again this week, but he'll do okay in situations where he has to, unless he's got to cover a slot receiver for some reason, in which case we're screwed.
But this is a very different animal, though, because this isn't just Derrick Henry lined up in the eye. Now you're dealing with a very mobile quarterback. They use 3 different running backs quite a bit, so
yes,
it's going to be a different challenge for him, right?
Yeah, basically what we've got to do this week, in my opinion, is something similar to what the Steelers did versus the Browns. They've got to be gap sound, and they've got to keep a very fast quarterback in the pocket. He is at his most dangerous, in my opinion, when he rolls out. If he rolls out and he's got time to look and see, eventually one of his receivers is going to come open and he's going to get the ball to him.
Yeah.
If he's got to throw from the pocket, especially if he's running a little bit off his spot, he's not very accurate. He's got a real strong arm, but he's not a very accurate thrower. And that being the case, we need to keep him in there where the law of averages favors the Steelers. You've got to keep him in the pocket if you can. You don't want to over pursue or pursue wide and give him room to escape the pocket going forward. Because even if he doesn't throw it, because he can escape,
Yeah.
He can escape via that loop and get you for 5 or 10 or 30 yards, or you give him a window where he can see receivers because you've looped out wide and he can see in front of him. You want to keep him in the pocket, give him less vision, but make him nervous, pressure him, but keep him in the pocket.
That was actually something that Kansas City did really well. When their outside linebackers got pressure, they didn't attack Jackson. They essentially slowed down and broke him down like he was a runner in space.
Right.
And forced his eyes to come down and forced him to try and step up. And then their interior guys, who are very good. I mean, Jones is an excellent interior rusher. Yeah. That Kansas City blitzed the crap out of them too, especially at the end of the game. They were like, we're going to bring everyone. We're going to leave our guys out on islands, and we don't think Jackson can throw to beat us. And it was one of those things where the outside linebackers of the Chiefs broke him down in space, and instead of just rushing at him and letting him juke around them and create space for himself,
is that something that Watt and Dupree can do, though? I mean, these guys are like attack dogs. They're just told, here, go get whoever's got the damn ball.
Yeah, they know how to open field tackle. You come to a point of balance before you connect. I mean, they know how to do that.
No, I'm not saying they don't know how to do that, but when you play a certain way for so long, and then all of a sudden you kind of are said, hey, now maybe throttle it down, so that you force him up into the pocket, into the interior guys. Does that take away some of their effectiveness?
No, I don't think it does. I think that it is exactly what Ian said. You've got to make him stop and think. And even if you do for a second or a second and a half, it throws the timing off for their offense. And our guys have got to cover that much longer, but it gives the interior rushers a chance to get at him. and it keeps him inside the pocket. And again, you break it down. You come to a point of balance. You don't just go straight at him and try and hit him as hard as you can. You don't go for the ball. You just stay in front of him and you keep him in front of you, especially if he's looking at you and let's say, it's Bud and he's got him. He's in his sights. Come to a point of balance. If TJ is coming from the other side and he's looking at Lamar's back, he can just go straight at him,
right,
and hit him, and vice versa. If it's TJ and he's breaking down and he's going, okay, I'm going to tackle you like you're a running back. Bud sees his back, he can go straight at him straight away. So that's the one exception to the rule there. But I think that if you keep him in the pocket and manage to pressure him, but conservatively.
Yeah.
That's the way you beat this guy. Don't let him out.
Right. And were you guys, Ian, I'll ask you first, were you surprised as well as we did last weekend against Jonnu Smith, tight end? I think he ended up with, one catch?
Yeah, I think it was like one catch.
I was worried about him. Now, I know he was nursing an ankle, so I don't know that he was 100%. But, and the reason I say that is because obviously the Ravens do a good job. Mark Andrews is a very good tight end.
Yes.
But, is it possible that we do another good job this week on them? I mean, Marquise Brown is certainly capable of having a big game against us. And, but I think to Ben's point too, Jackson isn't always the most accurate quarterback. And if you do get that interior pressure on him, it makes it a little bit easier.
It is. It certainly is. And one thing that the Ravens have done in recent years is to basically just stack their team with fast, speedy guys all over the field to help make plays with the ball in their hand when they can get the ball in their hand. Smith was only targeted 4 times last week, 1 catch for 9 yards. And Mark Andrews is going to get a lot more looks than that.
Yeah.
Baltimore does a good job of, they also have designed rollouts for Jackson, which, they roll him out, give him a run pass option with just a couple passing routes down the field. Like we talked about, Baltimore, most of their passing concepts are 2 or 3 man routes. They aren't, complicated concepts like Kansas City runs with 5 guys running all over the field on you that you got to try and figure out how to defend. They simplify it a bit, but Jackson's dangerous on the outside. Ben mentioned it before that, he can look like he's going to run and then pull up and throw and hit a guy, which makes it really hard for a defender, especially a defensive back on the outside. If you're covering a guy that's on a sideline route and you see Jackson coming towards you, if you leave your guy to try and tackle him, he's going to throw it to your guy. But if you don't leave your guy, he's going to run forever. So it's, they put defenders in lose-lose kind of situations. And one thing I did notice with Jackson when I watched some Ravens tape was he's not real good throwing to guys who are moving. He is much better at comeback routes, at curl routes, at spot routes where the receiver is essentially standing still or just slightly moving
towards him,
or coming towards him, then he is throwing crossing routes or post routes or things like that where he's got to throw it out to an area and let his receiver go get it. So maybe it was just the throws I noticed, but it seemed like a trend that he was better when his receivers were standing still and he had a stationary target to try and hit. Granted, he moves a lot, but and he's very good at he can throw on the run. But their running game also hasn't been as good this year. I mean, it's still statistically, the best in the league, but they've kind of split carries around. They haven't really found an effective rotation. Jackson has 50 carries through 6 games, which is, give or take 8 or 9 carries a game. Mark Ingram has 50 carries. Gus Edwards has 48 carries. J.K. Dobbins, who everyone was upset we didn't take and took Claypool instead. How's everybody feel about that? Dobbins has 25 carries. Yeah. And the other thing I'll note, which I think is important from a schematic standpoint, is that Ingram has 3 receptions on 5 targets. Edwards has no receptions on 3 targets. Dobbins has 11 receptions on 14 targets. So if Ingram or Edwards is in the game, they're probably not going to throw him the ball. They're not going to throw a screen pass. They're not going to do that kind of stuff. If Dobbins is in the game, you got to watch out for screen
Keep
passes.
an eye on him.
Yeah. And that's just kind of, one of those things like we talked about last year with the Steelers and how limited they were because of injuries, that if Benny Snell was in the game, they weren't throwing it to him. If, Jalen Samuels was in the game or Kareth White was in the game, the personnel in the game tips you off to what they're going to do. Now, granted, they've been handing off to Dobbins a little bit more, so there's a run pass option there. But with the other 2 guys, it's probably going to be they're going to run play action a lot. It's going to be that RPO style of, Jackson can either hand it off, pull it, and take it himself. Guys are going to have to stay true to their gap lanes and can't over pursue. But one thing that we did last year in the season finale, which was different than how we approached the first game against the Ravens last year,
very different,
was granted RG3 was playing quarterback and not Lamar Jackson, but Bud Dupree played in his normal outside linebacker spot, but was essentially designated as the QB hitter. And every play, even if Griffin handed it off, Dupree was hitting him. And if Griffin tried to keep it, he was Dupree's guy. They essentially assigned Dupree to, your guy is the quarterback, regardless of where the ball goes. And we got gashed on a couple running plays by Mark Ingram in that game that, he came inside Dupree because Dupree was just going for the quarterback. And by the 3rd or 4th time that it happened, it became pretty obvious that this was a schematic decision, that Dupree was just going for the quarterback. And I kind of thought maybe it was kind of sending a message hey, if you put Lamar in here against us next year, we're coming after him, and we're gonna hit him even after he hands the ball off. So keep an eye on that, because there's no rule. You can't hit a quarterback after he throws the ball, but there's no rule against hitting a quarterback after he hands it off.
No, it's a very old school, tried and true method. You want the quarterback knowing there's going to be punishment every single time, and you're right, Ian.
My final thought on that is, this past week against Tennessee, they did a really good job of moving Dupree around a little bit. They moved him inside and had him blitz the A-gap to essentially attack the handoff point where Derrick Henry was getting the ball, so that Henry couldn't even get those 2 or 3 steps as ahead of steam before he got the ball. That when you attack that handoff point, then Henry's having to sidestep in the backfield. And he picked up a couple yards a few times. But just that little sidestep slows down his momentum. And for a guy that big, slowing down that momentum is really helpful in having success against him. So I fully expect them to have some scheme, whether it's blitzing the A-gaps, whether it's sending Dupree off the edge, to try and attack that handoff point and, force Jackson to make some quicker decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I think they'll take some elements of that, like you're talking about with Dupree in the A gap, and anytime you can get a guy before he gets going, it's always an advantage. But this is just so different than Henry running downhill. Now you've got a guy that's going to be running east and west a little bit more before he turns it up. So definitely something to look for and keep an eye on there. Ben, you had a couple thoughts on the Steelers offense before we wrap things up here.
Well, Scarpino tweeted something this week about the results of these games all time.
Former Steelers PR guy, Ryan Scarpino, who, by the way, does a terrific impression of Troy Polamalu, but I digress.
It does a lot of impressions. Anyway, so Scarps tweets out, the Steelers are 8-2 all time on the road in Baltimore when scoring 20 points or more. They are 3-11 when they don't hit that 20-point mark in Baltimore. So that is, I think that's
a great stat.
Statistically significant, but also I look at the matchups, and I'm just speaking to the Steelers offense versus the Ravens defense, and the Steelers defense versus the Ravens offense. I think you have a very good offense versus a very good defense in the Steelers versus the Ravens. Steelers defense versus the Ravens offense.
Right.
I think you have a good offense versus a pretty good defense when you talk about the Steelers offense versus the Ravens defense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Ravens defense is as good as their offense. They may be improved, as Ian pointed out, with the addition of Ngakoue, but they may not. At least what we've seen thus far, that doesn't necessarily pencil out. So we need to get to that 20-point mark. How do we do that? I think we continue this, which may be a boring offense for a lot of people, where we're not throwing the ball long.
Mm-hmm.
I expect some long throws, but I expect more dink and dunk and running the ball and moving the chains and keeping the Ravens offense off the field, eating the clock, and playing efficient football, but not necessarily, high-flying, exciting offense.
Yeah.
Just trying to build a lead and getting to that 20-point mark will help. And I think it gives them a shot. They got to get there, though.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I mean, it's a good game plan. It worked last week for the most part, and I'm with you. I'm with you. Ian, go ahead. Give us your prediction on this big one on Sunday.
Oh, boy.
Guy who picked the Titans to win.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let me talk about this, though, because Ben obviously correctly predicted the score of last week's game, 27-24.
Fuck that score. God, I hated that score.
I'm just saying you correctly predicted it.
Yeah.
I believe my score was it 20? I said 31-30 or something like that.
Yeah, I believe that's it.
31-30.
Something.
And the Steelers are sitting there in field goal range with a 3rd and 12, and I'm thinking, if the Steelers kick a field goal here, they're going to wind up at 30, and then if Tennessee drives down the field and scores a touchdown, they're going to get 31. I was like, son of a bitch, So where the game was with 4 minutes left to play, I was actually not that far off. But I did. I will own it that I picked the Titans to win, and I was wrong. So I will own that.
Yep,
as
good.
All right.
Yes. The Steelers and Ravens over time have played a lot of 3-point games. Tons. Yeah. Like especially 23-20 games. It seems like we play 23-20 games against them all the time. So I honestly, I think I I picked against the Steelers last week and we won. So I'll pick the Ravens 23-20. I don't have a good feeling about this game. And I hope I'm wrong. Like last week, I hope I'm wrong, but my gut feeling just says that, if it's close and we let their offense hang around and run the ball, and if their offense can control the clock with their running game and keep our offense off the field, I think Justin Tucker's good enough to beat us, unfortunately.
Okay, the gauntlet has been thrown. Ben, what's your prediction for Sunday?
Nervous but excited.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Steelers 17, Ravens 18.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
18-17.
Yeah, low scoring game where, in the end, we're angry and, Tucker kicks 6 field goals to win the game.
Which would figure. I think we are coming off of one hell of a football game on Sunday. There was a lot of hitting, big hits, very aggressive, very physical football game. I cannot look past the fact that Baltimore is so good coming off the bye. I think
exactly.
Yeah, I think this is one. I think we're going to get the 20-point mark, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think we're going to lose 26-23. Whether it comes down to a Tucker field goal or not, I really don't know. But I just think we're going to run out of gas. I think that's an awful ask to go to Tennessee, beat a 5-0 team. Now you're essentially playing another 5-1 team. And you still got another road trip coming the week after. And I think that's where it's at. But obviously, we all hope the Steelers win. We're just trying to be as honest and realistic as possible. And that's what we do around here, So anyway, any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Yeah, I have a final thought.
Yes.
As to paraphrase Herb Brooks' speech in Miracle, when he said he's sick and tired of hearing what a great hockey team the Soviets have. I'm sick and tired of hearing what a great football team the Ravens have. Fuck them. Let's go beat them.
I like that. I like that.
All right, Ben.
My closing thought is that Ravens fans seem to be lesser douchebags and assholes on social media this year. So
no question.
There's that. I mean, they're still douchebags and assholes, but they're not as bad as as they've been in years past.
I agree. I think they like we've always said, there's just a little more respect with this rivalry than any of the other.
Is it just that they don't seem like as big of assholes now because the Browns fans are bigger assholes and
it's
Bengals fans have always been assholes, but
it's like Steelers fans hate Ravens fans hate us, but we can both agree that we all hate the Browns. I don't know.
I think the other thing too is that when even a couple of years ago when we used to argue with Ravens fans on social media, they could point out Joe Flacco had beaten us in the playoffs. Joe Flacco had won Super Bowls. Ben had won Super Bowls. Ben had beat them in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson has one win over the Steelers in his career, and that was over Mason Rudolph. It wasn't over Ben Roethlisberger.
He doesn't. He didn't play in that game.
Right. That's what I mean. The Jackson's only win was last year in the first game we played them against Mason. Jackson didn't play in 2018.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes. Yeah. And then didn't play against Duck in the season finale either because that was RG3. So not Mason Rudolph. Lamar Jackson has more playoff losses, 2, than he does wins over the Steelers, 1. And the fact that Lamar Jackson hasn't won anything in the postseason, he's 0-2 in the postseason.
Yes, he is.
I think
we could get into all of this, but
that gives Ravens fans some pause. I'm just saying that we have some legitimate arguments if we're going to go down that path against Ravens fans.
We could go with the first
media.
Yeah, we could talk about the first Ratbirds game last year. How poorly Jackson played versus the Steelers defense.
Yeah.
He did not play well. He was sacked 5 times. But he was a younger player, a different player. I don't expect the same thing this time. I
don't either. Not to that extent.
Yeah.
In any case, we're getting on out of here. Thank you once again, everybody, for listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.